It happened in Iceland on Friday, March 19, 2021 at 8:45 p.m. About 20 miles southwest of the capital. Molten rock suddenly burst through the surface from below. Bright lava fountains then lit up the night sky. A volcano in this valley finally woke up after almost 800 years of sleeping soundly. We divide volcanoes into three categories: active, dormant, or extinct. Around 1,900 of them around the globe are considered active. That means they've erupted in the recent past and will likely do it again in the possible near future. Dormant volcanoes haven't popped off for a long time, but they still may in the future. You could say they're sort of sleeping. As for extinct ones, those guys haven't done anything in more than 1 million years. The eruption in Iceland wasn't super explosive, and this all happened 6 miles from the nearest town, so everyone was perfectly safe. Many even came to see it up close, while other brave visitors tried to fry eggs and bacon on the lava. Just be careful not to burn your breakfast black. Lava can be over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It burns everything in its path. Yet it also produces some of the most fertile land for agriculture. This eruption gave a relatively small amount of lava at first, but it's been spreading across the valley in different directions, forming a sort of shield that's constantly growing. You can never really predict how fast a lava flow will be until you see it. It all depends on how thick it is and how steep the mountain slope. Lava can ooze slowly at about 20 feet a minute, a fraction of the average person's walking speed. Or it can flow as fast as 30 miles per hour, which even the fastest person on Earth can't outrun. But the lava isn't even the most dangerous thing about volcanoes. That would be the toxic gases spewing from the eruption. And those spread faster and further than the lava flow. Luckily, in Iceland's case, the wind has been blowing these gases away from residential areas. Scientists weren't surprised this volcano erupted. They knew it was coming. Increasingly stronger earthquakes had been shaking this area for the past 15 months. There were 50,000 earthquakes within just the 3 weeks leading up to the eruption. That's 100 per hour. The volcano has been active since March, and geologists say this could last for weeks, months, years, or even decades of constant eruptions in the area. Mount Shasta is in the top 5 most dangerous volcanoes in the U.S., so geologists are keeping a close eye on it. The last eruption was in 1250. I wasn't around then, but this volcano erupts every 600 to 800 years. Which means, tick-tock, we're due any day now. About an hour from Portland, Oregon, there's an active volcano that last erupted in the 19th century. Next time it goes off, scientists think it'll produce larger amounts of ash and dust. This could cause an electrical blackout and make water unsafe to drink in the area. But the experts pay close attention to Mount Hood. They'll be able to give plenty of warning so people can react in time. Kilauea is one of the most active volcanoes in the world. It's been erupting almost constantly since 1983, making it also one of the longest eruptions known on Earth. It's the youngest land volcano in Hawaii. Volcanoes can take thousands of years to form, but others can pop up practically overnight. A volcano in Mexico just erupted in an open field in 1943 and started growing from there. Within a year, it was almost 1,500 feet tall. When the eruptions finally stopped 9 years later, the mount had reached a height of over 9,200 feet. Mount Fuji is an iconic symbol of Japan. The last time it erupted was in 1707, and it sent a shower of burning rocks as far as 60 miles away. If a similar eruption happened today, Tokyo would be within that vicinity. Mount Fuji is right on the Ring of Fire, that horseshoe-shaped region in the Pacific Ocean full of active volcanoes and earthquakes. From one end to the other, it's almost 25,000 miles long. It could wrap all the way around the Earth's equator. In January 2020, Taal volcano in the Philippines started spewing lava, sending huge plumes of ash half a mile up into the sky. The eruption even triggered a rare phenomenon, a dirty thunderstorm. That's when the smoke cloud above a volcano produces its own lightning. The chance of volcanic tsunamis was also high. Those are usually caused by tectonic movements that occur because of volcanic activity. Taal has erupted more than 30 times in the last 450 years. This volcano in Ecuador last erupted in 2016. Scientists think it might be showing some early warning signs of magma on the move. This is an active stratovolcano, a specific cone-shaped type with steep sides. They form from sticky lava that doesn't flow that easily. That lava goes around the vent, cooling and piling on itself to form these steep walls. These types are more likely to produce explosive eruptions like the ones we see in movies. Ruapehu is the oldest national park in New Zealand, a volcanic wonderland where you can closely see all those steaming craters, magnificent lakes, and unusual rock formations. It last erupted in 2007 and has had 10 eruptions since the mid-19th century. But eruptions, lava flows, and toxic gases aren't the only danger coming from volcanoes. There's also a thing called lahar, a kind of volcanic mudflow of debris. In between eruptions, snow melts and a lake forms in the caldera. If the last eruption brought mud, ash, and rocks in the lake, it becomes dangerously full. In that case, only a temporary dam holds it back. Indonesia has the biggest number of active volcanoes in the world, including one called Anak Krakatoa. It means child of Krakatoa, and its famous parent isn't far away. A huge tsunami in 2018 partially woke Junior, a scary thought since Senior had one of the most powerful eruptions ever seen on this planet in 1883. Krakatoa's boom was the loudest sound ever heard. People over 2,000 miles away could hear the explosion. The sound wave circled the globe 7 times, and scientists say it's hard to predict this volcano's eruption patterns. Mount Yasur in Vanuatu is one of just a few volcanoes in the world where you can see a lava lake. Tourists even go there to peer over the edge and get a look at the burning, bubbling lake below. Well, except for when the volcanic activity goes to levels 3 and 4 out of 5. That means there are more intense earthquakes, volcanic tremors, or steam, gas, or ash ejections. Then this place is off limits because, duh. This volcano in the DR Congo has the most active and largest lake volcano in the world. And all that lava is unusually fluid, meaning it travels faster and further than the stuff coming out of most volcanoes. It's certainly not amongst the tallest ones, but Ethiopia's Erta Ali is unique in that it has a lava lake almost constantly, which is pretty rare. The locals call it a smoking mountain because its lava lake often causes eruptions. This volcano is near the Danakil Depression, one of the hottest places on our planet. Merupi has been erupting on a regular basis since the mid-16th century. This volcano helps scientists do crucial research on how eruptions work and how they can warn people in time. After it was dormant for a while, this volcano in central Mexico sprang back to life in 1994. Ever since then, it's been producing huge mud flows and strong explosions in unpredictable intervals. In the past, enormous eruptions coming from this giant buried entire cities in pyramids. Imagine staying in a hotel and waking up to the magnificent view of a massive volcano covered in glowing rivers of lava and clouds of ash. When it lets off heat, visitors to this area in Guatemala take a chance to roast some marshmallows there. One of the most active volcanoes on Earth is on a small island north of Sicily. Stromboli has regular explosions, together with glowing lava coming from vents inside the crater. Not too far away is Etna, Europe's most active volcano and one of the biggest continental ones in the world. By the way, Earth definitely isn't the only planet with volcanoes. The largest one in our solar system is on Mars. It would cover the entire state of Arizona, and it rises nearly 3 times higher than Mount Everest. Ooh, don't look down. So, since 2000, the world has been hit with more than 1,700 earthquakes with magnitude greater than 5. Many happened around the Ring of Fire, located around the Pacific Ocean. In North America, the biggest threat is the San Andreas fault line, which can create an earthquake of a magnitude higher than any other, earning it the spine-tingling nickname, the Big One. The potential destruction of California is a terrifying prospect that could have unimaginable consequences. But the Big One is just the beginning of what's to come. Bad news! Scientists have predicted an earth-shattering event that will occur in 2030. Like it or not, there's a 70% chance that we'll experience the Big One, and it will be an earthquake with a magnitude of 6.7. The San Andreas fault line will cause the Big One, but what is scary is that we can't predict it. On the other hand, a massive earthquake occurs every 100 years. This means there's always time to prepare for a natural disaster. If we traveled back in time, we'd see a few significant earthquakes like the ones that wiped out San Francisco and Fort Tejon. Buildings made a long time ago are not quake-proof. They will collapse. Even if they survive, you should not enter them. But buildings are not the most dangerous part. You should watch out for electrical lines and gas pipes. Your hill house might be lovely, but it is extremely unsafe. During quakes, the hill can turn into a massive landslide that will destroy everything in its path. Say goodbye to road trips because all the roads will be ruined. You should have some spare water and food since you won't be able to go to the supermarket. This disaster won't be cheap. It will cost the U.S. around $200 billion to recover from the quake. At least the earthquake will not trigger tsunamis. But there's something it can cause more damage than the Big One. The notorious Cascadia subduction zones start in California and ends up all the way in Vancouver, Canada. The San Andreas fault line is nothing compared to this zone. It can wipe the whole coast off the face of the Earth, an example of hyperbole. Subduction zones are tectonic plates forced to be one under the other and constantly pulling apart. One is called the North American Plate and the other is the Juan de Fuca Plate. Zones like these are not to be messed with, since they are terrifying hotspots for earthquake activity and extremely dangerous because they cause massive underwater quakes. But they are underwater, so what can they do to us? Well, they can cause giant tsunamis, flooding cities, and destroying the coastline. Right now, the most active zone is the Ring of Fire. The Cascadia zone might be less active, but it is like a sleeping beast that can wake up and destroy everything in its path, causing a groundbreaking earthquake. The last time all this stress was released was in the year 1700. Unlike the San Andreas quake, this one will cause massive tsunamis and much bigger shocks. Let's hope you'll be camping in an open field at that time, because most buildings and bridges will likely be destroyed. Also, be ready for the aftershocks, as they'll be devastating. Nature won't be spared either. Landslides will change animals' habitats. Even our homes will be changed forever. Luckily, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and scientists are doing everything they can to ensure our safety. New rules are implemented. Every new building must be able to withstand massive shocks. They're developing modern warning systems, and every new infrastructure must follow strict quake-proof guidelines. The Juan de Fuca and the North American plates are locked together, but they won't stay like that forever. When they unlock, get ready for a massive shake. The closer you are to the epicenter, the more damage you'll experience. But even if you are lucky to be far away, you may still feel the ground shaking for some time. Now, if we compare the Cascadia subduction zone and the San Andreas fault, we'll see how much more dangerous the Cascadia zone is. In 1994, there was an enormous 6.7 magnitude earthquake in the Northridge area, close to the San Andreas fault. Sadly, many people didn't make it, and some were injured. Back then, buildings were not strong and earthquake-proof, and many of them were damaged. The Cascadia subduction zone can potentially cause a magnitude 9 earthquake. A magnitude 6 quake has the power of around 44 million pounds of dynamite, but a magnitude 9 has the power of 44 trillion pounds of dynamite. The strongest ever recorded quake was in Chile. Its magnitude measured 9.5, and it destroyed most everything. So let's say you've survived the quake, but the struggle is far from over. Soon after, a massive tsunami will strike, with waves that might reach up to 100 feet in some areas. That's so unlike the San Andreas earthquake, which can't produce any significant waves. So say goodbye to your beautiful garden, since salt water will destroy trees and plants, changing the environment for a period of time. The only positive thing will be you won't need Halloween decorations, because all those dried-out trees will resemble a ghost forest. The combination of waves, quakes, and the sheer size of the area will make this natural disaster much more dangerous than any caused by the San Andreas Fault or the so-called Big One. A quake similar to this happened around 300 years ago. Many more have been recorded in the past 3,500 years, proving that they continually occur every 400 to 600 years. So, technically, we have around 100 to 300 years before the next big one hits. We still have no idea how exactly the Cascadia subduction zone works, because we discovered it in 1970. This zone is super scary because it can cause big earthquakes. It was found by accident when researchers studied the Ring of Fire. They wanted to know if this area had caused any trouble in the past years, and the proof was under their noses. In Washington, there is a horror forest where nothing has been growing for years. When researchers tested the soil, they found a tremendous amount of salt. They put two and two together and concluded that a massive tsunami had been the reason. Experts still didn't know when the forest was destroyed. But Japan kept records of a gigantic earthquake that had a similar effect. It was the one that happened in the year 1700. There is a 1 in 3 chance that the next one will occur in 2050. You must know how to survive the Canadian earthquakes and make it out unscathed, so listen carefully. Those who live in this area have almost no experience with earthquakes like this one. Surviving the quake is relatively easy, but the tsunami coming afterwards is the real danger. After the shake, find the highest ground and go there. Only bring the essentials, like food and water. Yeah, leave your baseball card collection at home. After the first hit, don't try to go down. Seismologists say that most likely there will be a few more waves, and they have proven this. On the 22nd of May, 1960, seismologist Jerry Eston and his 4 friends went to Hawaii to see an expected tsunami that was to happen around midnight. They set up their gear on Wailuku Bridge with an escape route planned. This bridge had been destroyed in the previous tsunami, but the new one was much taller and better. After midnight, the water was 4 feet above the average level. The second wave hit a half hour after midnight, and the water rose another 9 feet by 1 a.m. The water started going down and dropped by 7 feet, but the horror was far from over. Next, they saw a wave that was around 20 feet tall. This shows us that tsunamis are unpredictable, and we should listen to experts to stay safe.
Not an earthquake, but a mega earthquake could happen in Japan. It's scarier, bigger, and more destructive than ordinary tremors. However, the problem is that it will occur underwater, which means it will trigger a giant tsunami 100 feet high. A column of water nearly as high as a 10-story building will collapse on coastal cities, wiping out hundreds of houses. The water flow can destroy everything in its path like a bowling ball that knocks down pins. And then another wave may come, and another one. Anyone who is at risk should be on their guard. How to survive? You'll find out later in this video. But first, let's find out what a mega earthquake is. This is an earthquake with a magnitude 9 or more. This is a very rare phenomenon, and it depends not on the power of the shock, but on the length of the fault where it occurs. The longer the fault, the stronger the earthquake. But what are these faults? These are cracks in the rocks of the Earth's crust that move relative to each other. Imagine a large puzzle where every detail is a giant tectonic plate. When one part of the puzzle moves away from another or when they collide, that's when earthquakes begin. If the fault between the parts is long, then the magnitude of the earthquake is great. The largest mega earthquake ever recorded occurred on May 22, 1960, in Chile. The fault was almost 1,000 miles long. It's almost half the way between Chicago and Los Angeles. And now, a similar mega earthquake can happen underwater. That's how it all started. Last year, on August 8th, at 4:42 p.m., an earthquake with a magnitude of 7.1 occurred in southern Japan. The tremors appeared off the coast of the mainland island of Kyushu. Everyone was terrified as they expected a large tsunami to appear. But fortunately, they faced only a small wave. It collapsed on the shore, but didn't destroy buildings. About 15 people got hurt, which is sad, of course. But it could have been worse. It seemed that the disaster had passed. The residents breathed a sigh of relief. However, after that, the Japan Meteorological Agency sent a warning about a possible mega-earthquake that could be incredibly devastating. A previous earthquake of 7.1 magnitude could be a harbinger of an impending catastrophe, a disaster that could affect 250,000 people. As soon as people heard this, they ran to buy groceries. Increased demand and a slight panic led to shortages of rice and several other basic products. People were stocking up on food and preparing for the worst. But a week later, the Japan Meteorological Agency canceled the warning. It turned out that the small tsunami on Kyushu Island was not a harbinger. No one knows whether a mega earthquake and tsunami will happen in this region, but the chances are very high. To understand the nature of this danger, we need to dive underwater in a place called the Nankai Trough. It is a 500-mile-long underwater fault that runs almost parallel to the Pacific coast of Japan. This is where the two giant sections of the Earth's crust meet, the Philippine Sea Plate and the Eurasian Plate. And the Philippine Plate is subducting and slowly slipping under the Eurasian Plate, on which Japan is partly located. During this movement, the plates get stuck, accumulating energy. Afterward, when they move and align again, they release a powerful burst of energy. And this energy is capable of causing one of the most powerful earthquakes in the world. Experts report that the probability of a mega earthquake and a tsunami is about 80%. Over the past 1,400 years, mega earthquakes have occurred every 100 to 200 years in this region. The last time this happened in Japan was in 1946. The entire country felt a powerful tremor that destroyed 36,000 houses in the southern part of Honshu Island. Every year, the probability of a repeat of this disaster increases by 1%. And do you know how many years have passed? 79. According to experts, a mega earthquake with a magnitude of 8 to 9 can trigger a tsunami that will flood small islands off the coast of Japan. And areas with large populations on the islands of Honshu and Shikoku can be flooded in minutes. Hundreds of thousands of people are at risk. It can be billions and even trillions of dollars worth of damage. According to some reports, about 530,000 people may lose their homes. To save lives, the country needs to carry out a large-scale evacuation. But the problem is that no one knows the exact date. In general, no one in the world can predict in advance when the next big earthquake will occur. In the case of the Nankai Trough, it can happen in a few days, or a few years, or even centuries. So, what should people do? Prepare. Japan has been experiencing earthquakes for a long time, so the country has learned to survive a disaster with minimal losses. Almost every building in Japan is equipped with dampers, which are devices that suppress any vibrations and make houses more resistant to shaking. In addition, on the shores of Japan, residents have built long and high shields that don't allow powerful waves to break through to land. Japan also has an advanced earthquake warning system. It's impossible to predict powerful seismic activity in a few days or weeks, but it's possible to detect small tremors that may portend an impending earthquake. Special devices monitor seismic signals and transmit the data to certain programs. Then, they evaluate the magnitude and intensity of the tremors and send warnings to people's phones. This can save seconds and even minutes for locals to reach the nearest shelter in time. These systems are also used to slow down the speed of trains, to stop work at factories, hospitals, and office buildings. It's much safer for a train driver to slow down during an earthquake than to rush forward at full speed. But what if you're on the street and you can't hear your phone messages? How to act in case of disaster? This applies not only to Japan, but also to any place where a tsunami or earthquake may occur. To survive a tsunami, you need to prepare for it long before a big wave hits. It's very important to have good relations with neighbors. Be friendly with them, help them, and treat them well. In times of trouble or disaster, it's great to have people with whom you have a good relationship. They can help you get out of a difficult situation, and you can also help them. Be kind and compassionate to people. This way, it's much easier to survive any disaster. Prepare a backpack with necessities in advance. These are a first aid kit, canned food, flashlights, a battery-powered radio, and bottled water. All this will not only save your life, but will also help other people in trouble. So if you feel an earthquake start, immediately run for cover. If you're at home, try to stand against a wall closest to the center of the building, or crawl under heavy furniture that stands firmly on the floor, such as a desk or a regular table. Stay away from windows and front doors, and never use an elevator. If you're on the street, don't come close to power lines and any objects that may fall. During a tsunami, you may need to get as high as possible to avoid getting swallowed by water. Stay as far away from the shore as you can, and don't go down until you're sure it's safe. But how can you find out about an approaching wave if you haven't received the warning? When a tsunami approaches the shore, you will hear a roar similar to the rumble of a passing train or plane. If there's no elevation nearby, then try to get to the upper floors. It must be at least the third floor, but it has to be a building that can resist a tsunami, such as a massive house made of concrete. If there are no such high buildings nearby, try to climb a massive tree. When the disaster is over, look around and find those you can help. Listen to messages from rescuers via radio or TV. If all is well, then you can deal with the consequences. Yes, there's a lot of work ahead, but you've survived and helped others survive. And that's the most important thing. The floor starts quaking like it's alive. Books, mugs, and lamps leap off shelves. Your feet slide, your body sways, and you can barely stay upright. It stops for a second, but then it shakes again and again. More than 1,000 times just in one day. This is not how you imagined your trip to Santorini, but it's the new reality. The Santorini seismic swarm started in January 2025. In less than 1 month, there were, get ready for it, more than 20,000 reported earthquakes. For comparison, most cities on Earth go through one small, barely noticeable quake in a year. It all started with small jolts that residents could feel, but tourists might have mistaken for large trucks driving nearby. But by February, things got serious. A magnitude 5.3 quake struck. It's a moderate-strength earthquake, but it was strong enough to rattle homes, break windows and dishes, and terrify the island's population. The Greek authorities declared a state of emergency for Santorini and Amorgos. Thousands of people had to leave their homes. Schools closed, and hotels temporarily evacuated their guests. Santorini is famous for its volcano, the one that blew up in a massive eruption around 1600 BCE and inspired the legend of Atlantis. It's still considered to be active, although there have been no significant eruptions since the 1950s. So it would be logical to blame this monster for all the drama. But nope, these tremors weren't volcanic. Experts said what was happening near Santorini looked like a seismic swarm. It's a series of smaller quakes all happening in the same area. They are happening along faults, which are cracks in the Earth's crust that can suddenly shift when the tension gets too high. Think of the ground like a giant, stressed-out Rubik's Cube. At some point, it twists and snaps somewhere. Near volcanic areas like Santorini, fluids moving underground can sneak into these cracks and make them easier to break. Plus, there's the natural stress from tectonic movements. It's like adding oil to a squeaky, overworked hinge. Suddenly, everything slips. Nobody knows exactly what's coming next. Tracking thousands of tremors isn't easy. Many of them are too small for traditional seismic sensors to pick up. But this time, scientists have their new best friend to help out. I'm talking about artificial intelligence. Thanks to machine learning, researchers can detect patterns in tiny vibrations that humans might miss. This technology has helped a lot to understand the swarm. It lets scientists map which parts of the crust are most active and even predict possible future activity. The AI analysis suggests the quakes aren't random. They seem to be clustered along a fault line near the underwater Colombo volcano. This area has a long history of seismic activity. Even though Colombo hasn't erupted recently, the magma beneath it might be subtly shifting the crust, and it adds tension to the tectonic plates above. It's like a simmering pot. Nothing boils over yet, but the heat is definitely building. The swarm has subsided after a couple of months of constant shaking, but it doesn't mean it's over for good. Even after a lull, another swarm could strike, or a larger quake could happen along the same fault lines. That's why scientists are now studying the data collected from the swarm. If you're thousands of miles away from Santorini and don't have plans to visit, it doesn't mean you're 100% safe from a similar scenario. Seismic swarms like the Greek one happened in the Caribbean, Iceland, and Italy. One of the best documented swarms in history happened in Japan, in a suburb northwest of Tokyo. It was all going on in a town sitting on a seismological observatory, like a secret underground lab for tracking earthquakes. The swarm kicked off in August 1965 with just 3 earthquakes that were so weak nobody could feel them. But things escalated fast, and 3 months later, 100 quakes a day were strong enough for people to feel. On one day, the observatory recorded almost 7,000 quakes. Out of those, 585 were strong enough to actually shake the ground, meaning you could feel a quake roughly every 2.5 minutes. Scientists figured out that the swarm was caused by fluids moving underground, kind of like the Earth's crust, stretching and bubbling. Studying seismic swarms helps scientists predict earthquakes better, understand how Earth's crust moves, and even prepare for future natural disasters globally. For instance, if they can link the patterns of tremors to magma movement or tectonic shifts, they can apply similar models to volcanoes and fault lines in Hawaii, Iceland, or the Pacific Northwest. Santorini is like a living lab where they combine modern tech with traditional knowledge. AI, seismographs, and satellite imaging add to centuries of human observation. The locals who have lived through quakes for generations contribute insights about small tremors, changes in groundwater, and unusual animal behavior. All this helps scientists refine their models. Santorini's swarm has surely grabbed the attention of the whole world, but it's not the only place on Earth with some intense seismic activity. But what makes Santorini unique is its combination of historical volcanoes, underwater fault lines, and the fact that it's a real tourist magnet. The island is not so large, and the effects of even moderate tremors feel stronger and more dramatic than in other regions. In other places, though, even more serious earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic activity are regular news, and the people have learned to live with them. Japan is one of the regions on Earth where earthquakes happen the most because it sits on the edges of 4 tectonic plates. There are around 1,500 of these earthquakes each year that are noticeable. Because of this, the people in Japan have learned to live with earthquakes. There's even a law that sets a rule that buildings in the country should be able to handle earthquakes up to a magnitude of 7 without falling apart. An update 30 years later said that buildings should only have minor damage in such earthquakes and still work as usual. But if an earthquake is even stronger, the law says the building's main job is not to collapse, but to save people's lives. At the most basic level, buildings are made stronger with thicker beams, pillars, and walls so they can handle shaking better. They even construct some buildings on thick layers of padding that separate them from the ground completely, which helps protect them during an earthquake. A skyscraper might sway back and forth a lot and move up to 5 feet, but it won't collapse. On the other side of the Pacific, scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey have studied a dangerous area along the U.S. West Coast. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. Over the past 14,200 years, there have likely been at least 30 big earthquakes in this region. One major quake happened every 500 years on average. But for a long time now, Cascadia has been quiet, and the scientists are getting worried. They think this might be because the area is locked, so the tectonic plates are stuck together and building up a lot of pressure. At some point, a part of the seafloor could suddenly break and move forward by several feet. The shaking would be just 5 minutes, but it would create a powerful tsunami as the seafloor shifts that would last for 10 hours. If it happens, it's going to be the worst natural disaster in the country's history, according to experts. This could make the hillside slide and crumble and take down roads and bridges. Around 620,000 buildings could be badly damaged or even collapse. Scientists are hoping that thanks to advanced AI tech and local communities, they'll be able to better predict earthquakes like this and the one in Santorini. This could save thousands of lives. And for now, we must not forget that the Earth doesn't take vacations when it comes to seismic activity, even in places where you go on vacation. On January 26, 1700, one of the biggest earthquakes in history hit off the coast of the United States. It had a magnitude of 9, which puts it in the top 10 most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. This earthquake triggered a huge tsunami and changed the coastline all the way from southern British Columbia down to northern California forever. Back then, the area wasn't very populated, but thanks to some clever research, scientists figured out exactly what happened that day by looking at old geological records, tree rings, and even some history from Japan. On the same day as the earthquake, a massive tsunami also hit Japan's eastern coast. For a long time, no one connected the two, but in the 1980s and 90s, researchers realized the tsunami in Japan had been caused by the earthquake in the Pacific Northwest. They were also able to pinpoint the exact day, January 26, 1700. They even found old trees in coastal Washington that had all perished around the winter of 1700, which matched up perfectly with the timing of the earthquake. The earthquake came from the Cascadia subduction zone, a fault where the Juan de Fuca plate slides under the North American plate. This fault stretches about 700 miles, from northern Vancouver Island in British Columbia to Cape Mendocino in California. The pressure from the moving plates builds up over time, and eventually, another big, devastating earthquake will hit the same region. It's just a matter of time. By looking at the geological records, past tsunami deposits, and signs of land level changes, scientists can figure out how often these huge earthquakes happen. Emergency planners have been preparing for the next big quake, often calling it the big one. Scientists believe earthquakes in the Cascadia subduction zone happen every 200 to 1,000 years. And since the last major one was over 300 years ago, the Pacific Northwest is definitely due for another. When it happens, the earthquake is expected to be as big as the one from 1700. But this time, it'll affect around 15 million people. The devastation will be severe. Buildings will collapse, roads and runways will crack, and bridges will fall. Communication in and out of the area will be cut off. But the worst part? The earthquake will trigger a massive tsunami that might hit parts of the Washington coast in as little as 10 minutes. It's not a matter of if, but when the Cascadia subduction zone will break. When it happens, it will be the worst disaster the US has ever faced. Worse than the Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy. It'll impact an enormous area stretching from southern British Columbia all the way down through Oregon to northern California. That means millions and millions of people will be affected. Fairchild is considered a backup staging area for handling the aftermath of the earthquake, with Grant County International Airport in Moses Lake being the main one. For those who will survive the initial quake and tsunami, the aftermath could be just as disastrous. Aftershocks will follow, and transportation will be a mess. Roads will be damaged or completely blocked, airports will shut down, and most of the main routes, like Interstate 5, will have bridges destroyed. This means food and water supplies will be cut off, and it will be incredibly difficult for help to get in or for people to escape. Gas pipelines will most likely be damaged too, and restoring them could take anywhere from a few days inland to weeks or even months along the coast. Power outages will be widespread within 100 miles of the coast throughout the entire Pacific Northwest. And water could be out for 3 to 7 months. Even telecommunications will be down for 2 to 3 months across the Pacific Northwest, Alaska, and even parts of East Asia. The good news for eastern Washington is that it will mostly avoid the worst of it, thanks to natural barriers between the west and east sides of the state. The tsunami may hit the Columbia River Gorge, but it will lose energy quickly because of a sandbar under the river. The Cascade Mountains will absorb much of the earthquake's impact, so the east side won't feel it as strongly. And since eastern Washington won't get hit as hard, it'll be up to them to handle the aftermath of the quake. That means helping western Washington, taking in refugees from the areas that got destroyed, and delivering supplies to where they're needed. Scientists have looked at other major 8.0 to 9.0 magnitude earthquakes like the ones in Chile in 1960, Alaska in 1964, and Sumatra in 2004, and Japan in 2011. These kinds of quakes can shake the ground for anywhere between 6 to 10 minutes, and that's a long time for the ground to be shaking. Such quakes are super intense because they happen close to Earth's surface, so it's not just a quick shake. It's a long, strong one that can cause a lot of damage. If the Cascadia earthquake and tsunami were to hit tomorrow, over 13,800 people could lose their lives, and about 107,000 people could be injured. The economic toll in Washington, Oregon, and California could top $70 billion. To put that into perspective, we can compare these numbers with some other major earthquakes. In Chile's 1960 earthquake, about 1,650 people lost their lives. The 1964 Alaska quake resulted in around 140 lives lost. The 2004 Sumatra earthquake and tsunami took the lives of an estimated 280,000 people. And the 2011 Japan earthquake and tsunami caused over 20,000 casualties. Authorities know about the dangers of the Cascadia Fault, but even with all the planning, no one can say for sure what will be needed when the big quake hits. Right after the earthquake and tsunami, the areas outside the immediate disaster zone won't be able to help much because roads and airports will be destroyed, and resources will be limited. How can we deal with this kind of disaster and its effects? We don't have all the answers yet. Right now, let's focus on the Cascadia subduction zone. It's a huge fault line that stretches about 620 miles from Vancouver Island to Cape Mendocino in California, sitting about 93 miles off the coast. It's like one tectonic plate is slowly sliding under another. When the plates are close to the surface, about 18 miles deep or less, they get stuck because of friction, kind of like pushing two rocks together. Over time, this creates a lot of pressure. When the pressure finally becomes too much, the plates slip, causing a massive earthquake. This is called a megathrust earthquake, and it can be huge. Below the area where the plates are stuck, there's a zone where the plates move really slowly. We're talking about just a few inches every few months. This slow movement helps to release some of the pressure, but it also builds up more pressure on the parts of the fault that are still stuck. This means that over time, it increases the chances of a huge earthquake happening. These massive quakes, called Great Subduction Zone earthquakes, can be stronger than magnitude 8.5. Megathrust earthquakes are the biggest earthquakes that happen. They can go over a magnitude of 9.0, which is insanely powerful. Just to put it in perspective, a magnitude 9.0 earthquake releases 1,000 times more energy than a 7.0 and 1,000,000 times more energy than a 5.0. These earthquakes happen when a lot of pressure builds up in a part of the fault that's locked, which means the plate can't move past each other. When that pressure gets too high, the fault finally ruptures, releasing all that built-up energy in one massive shake.
The Cascadia subduction zone is super long. That's why if it were to rupture all at once, it could produce a large earthquake. Scientists have studied this region and found that about 18 miles below the surface, the fault is completely locked. The plates there aren't sliding past each other. But deeper down, the plates start to slide more smoothly, causing less friction. This is important because it tells us how much stress is building up in that locked zone, and how it could eventually lead to a major earthquake.
Something is about to reshape the entire future of the West Coast. The coastline, the infrastructure, the whole map. Scientists fear there is not one but two big earthquakes coming, one caused by another. This wasn't even on the radar for most people, but new research is changing everything. For decades, everyone treated the San Andreas Fault and the Cascadia subduction zone like two separate monsters that just happened to live in the same neighborhood. They were powerful, yes, but independent. But now, scientists believe these two giant faults are mechanically linked, and one can literally pull the other into rupturing shortly afterward. Cascadia moves, San Andreas moves. San Andreas tears, Cascadia tears. And the potential consequences of that are honestly haunting. Scientists found evidence that it happened at least 10 times in the last 3,100 years. Earthquake, pause, earthquake. It comes from marine sediment cores, which are like time capsules pulled up from the ocean floor. Researchers analyzed layer after layer of seabed sediment and found doublets. Paired debris layers created by two massive quakes happening so close together that the ocean barely had time to settle between them. That discovery takes us to the Mendocino Triple Junction, the geological troublemaker of the West Coast. It's the place where three tectonic plates crash and grind into each other like badly aligned gears. It's also the zone where the San Andreas meets Cascadia, which makes it the perfect place for these double quakes to form. The stress changes caused by a rupture in one fault travel straight through this junction and destabilize the other. It's benign when it happens to a bookshelf. When you move one book, three others shift. But when you think about it like a coastline with millions of people, entire cities, major infrastructure, it instantly feels terrifying. To many people who live on the West Coast, the San Andreas kind of feels like a California's problem, and Cascadia like an Oregon and Washington's problem. But when you understand that these two faults can essentially fire at each other, it stops being a local issue and becomes a continental one. A Cascadia megaquake alone can hit magnitude 9.0 plus, rip open 600 to 700 miles of seafloor, and send a tsunami roaring toward the Pacific coast. And it could just be the first quake, and then, maybe minutes later, the San Andreas snaps in Northern California. The shaking could ripple down the state like a zipper tearing open a jacket, and if it goes the other direction, it could be just as bad. If the San Andreas ruptures first, the intense stress redistribution can destabilize the Cascadia subduction zone. You could get the California quake first with buildings rocking, highways breaking, and power stations failing. And then, soon after, the ocean pulls back in Oregon or Washington. And the 20-minute countdown to a tsunami begins, a follow-up disaster. It's the kind of chain reaction you don't want even in a video game, let alone real life. This discovery also tells us something eerie about the earthquake in 1700, the one that sent a tsunami across the Pacific so huge that it struck Japan with no warning. Japanese fishermen called that wave the orphan tsunami because it arrived without any felt shaking. Only centuries later, scientists figured out that it came from the Pacific Northwest. But until recently, no one knew that the San Andreas might have felt that event too, and it possibly slipped or destabilized because of it. So, the whole West Coast may have moved together. And we've come to the scariest part. All this isn't about if, it's strictly about when. The faults have a rhythm, a pace, and a geological heartbeat. We've seen how they behave across thousands of years. We know what they did, and now we know they sometimes do it in sequence. The real fear isn't the first quake. California already expects a big one. The real fear is the second quake, the one that comes before you've checked on your family, before emergency responders regroup, before the power comes back, and before the dust settles. Even if you don't live on the West Coast, this matters for you too. The ports in California, Oregon, and Washington handle a massive chunk of America's imports. Knock them offline, and it's not just the coastline that feels it. The ripple hits the entire country and potentially the world. Grocery prices spike, supply chains freeze, gas availability dips, shipping timelines go nuts. The world is much more connected than any of us thought, and a geological double punch on the Pacific coast wouldn't stay a local disaster. It would spread, thread by thread, into everyone's life. So, those in power must prepare not for one giant rupture, but for two. Emergency plans, evacuation routes, response times, and power grid designs, all of it needs updating. Because nature has now shown us what even a single major rupture can do to a modern economy. It happened in Japan in 1995, on January 17th at 5:46 in the morning. The quake hit right by the northern tip of Awaji Island, only 12 miles from Kobe, a huge, busy city with about 1.4 million people back then, and another 2.6 million in Osaka nearby. The rupture ripped along the Nojima Fault for about 25 miles. That doesn't sound like much until you realize entire buildings can't survive that kind of sideways shove. More than 5,000 people lost their lives. 43,000 were injured. Nearly 400,000 buildings were irreparably damaged. This disaster hit one of Japan's largest industrial zones. And when you mess with a place like that, the shock doesn't stop at the shoreline. The damage was $200 billion US in losses, from smashed buildings and infrastructure and many businesses shutting down. Kobe's port just collapsed. Only 30% of the Osaka-Kobe railway lines worked. Part of National Route 28 literally vanished into the ground. Schools, hospitals, and municipal buildings, 85% of them took damage or were unusable. Fires broke out across Kobe, almost 300 separate incidents, burning the equivalent of 70 US city blocks and taking another 600 to 700 lives. Almost 100,000 people permanently left the region, 2.5% of the whole population gone in less than a year. And here's a detail that stuck with me. So many bridges failed that engineers suddenly had to confront how poorly older designs handled lateral shaking. Houses with heavy tiled roofs, built to fight typhoons, crumbled because all that weight sat too high. But the newer homes made after the 1981 building code revision stood. And that's when Japan realized that modern seismic standards were crucial to follow. Japan threw $58 billion US into restoring the region. Power came back in days. Roads and rail returned in 5 to 8 months. The main expressway took 21 months. The port was fully rebuilt in just over 2 years. And by then, all debris was cleared. Within 15 months, manufacturing jumped back to 98% of its old level. Stores reopened. By 1999, Kobe's economy reached roughly 75 to 90% of pre-quake levels. Japan overhauled its disaster management system entirely. They set up the Central Disaster Management Council and rewrote building codes. They upgraded everything from emergency drills to fire-resistant city layouts, and they launched the Earthquake Early Warning System that now gives Japan those precious few seconds before shaking hits. The same system that saved countless lives since 2007. But despite all this improvement, the Kansai region still sits on dangerous ground. The Roku-Awaji-shima fault system, the same one that snapped in 1995, still runs under them. The 2018 Northern Osaka quake and the 2024 Noto Peninsula quake reminded everyone that this threat didn't disappear. It just waits its turn. A future large event on that system could hit even harder simply because the region has grown more complex, more interconnected, and more economically loaded. So Kobe wasn't even a triggered double fault rupture, but it still broke a major industrial hub, reshaped a national economy, and permanently changed global shipping routes. That's why when scientists started talking about two joint faults firing off back-to-back in Cascadia and San Andreas, you don't even have to imagine the consequences. We already got a preview in 1995. 7,500 years ago, the Pacific floor collapsed. Massive landslides buried the seabed in seconds. Fast forward to today. Robot subs have examined the place. Scans have revealed proof of at least 10 distinct cyclical megaquakes. Now, researchers warn, the plates are still locked and building pressure, even today. If they start moving, that could trigger new red alert earthquakes and send disastrous tsunamis toward the coast. Let's look at the map. The fault here is like a giant zipper. It's over 600 miles, stretching from Northern California to Canada. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, and it's a part of the Ring of Fire. You know, the famous giant horseshoe around the Pacific that can serve as your where-to-go reminder if you're into volcanic and earthquake tourism. One of Cascadia's biggest events happened around the year 1700. There are no local written records of it, but there is a story. A well-known indigenous legend tells of an epic battle between a thunderbird and a whale. In the story, the thunderbird's wing beats make the ground shake. The whale's thrashing sends seawater flooding inland. The thunderbird wins by finally grabbing the whale and slamming it back down, shaking the land itself. Many researchers believe that this legend originated from the real earthquake of 1700. But we don't just have cool myths to give us the full picture. In the early 1700s, samurai officials recorded waves flooding villages and rice fields. But nobody felt the earthquake that must come first. That's why they nicknamed this event the Orphan Tsunami. But it did have a parent, and it took scientists 300 years to finally connect it back to Cascadia. To see Cascadia's past, researchers sent robot subs to scan the bottom in crazy detail. They expected to see a simple crack, but what they found looked more like giant underwater steps. Some of those steps are about 33 feet tall, like a 3-story building. That only happens when a big piece of the seafloor snaps off, breaks loose, and slides all at once, not slowly. When that happens, it kicks up a mud avalanche. Picture a jar of dirt and water. Shake it hard, and a fresh layer settles at the bottom. Each layer is basically a timestamp from a huge quake. When scientists counted and dated them, they found 10 separate megaquakes that hit one after the other over thousands of years. That means that Cascadia doesn't let pressure out little by little. It stays stuck for a long time, then suddenly breaks out violently. That pattern is why the Cascadia Subduction Zone is considered one of the scariest fault systems in North America today. So what's actually happening down there? The plates aren't sliding smoothly, they're stuck. And while they're stuck, the coastline is getting quietly bent out of shape, like a ruler you're flexing in your hands. It doesn't look dramatic day to day, but it's been loading up for centuries. When that tension finally snaps, the coast will instantly drop. Geologists call this co-seismic subsidence. We're talking about the ground plunging 6 to 8 feet vertically in a matter of minutes. Imagine standing on a beach. The shaking stops, and you realize the ocean is rushing in. Not just because of a wave, but because the land you're standing on has physically sunk below sea level. That one move is enough to shove the seafloor out of position and force the ocean above it to react. Cascadia can produce a magnitude 9.0. That's top tier, categorized as the most destructive natural event that can happen. It can shake the ground for minutes, pushing and pulling everything back and forth until buildings and bridges start falling down. A 9.0 class quake also means the seafloor is vibrating and shifting, lifting in some spots, dropping in others, all in one sudden motion. A tsunami starts when the seafloor moves and pushes a huge amount of water out of the way. If the bottom suddenly lifts or drops, the water above it gets displaced instantly. That water has to go somewhere, so it races outward in every direction. Out in deep water, that wave is rarely tall. It spreads out across a long distance, so it can pass under ships without anyone noticing. The danger is speed. In the open ocean, tsunamis can travel around 500 to 600 miles per hour. That's like traveling from New York to Detroit in 60 minutes. Eventually, the ocean starts to pile up, getting taller by the second. Near shore, it can stack up to tens of feet, and in extreme cases, it can run up to 100 feet on land. It swallows the coast, then drags everything back to sea with a violent tug before the next hit arrives. But that's not all. When the fault snaps, it often triggers massive underwater landslides. When a huge chunk of seafloor collapses, it can shove water locally, like dropping a boulder into a tub. In the Cascadia subduction zone, you aren't just dealing with the earthquake's kick. You're getting a 1-2 punch from the shifting crust and the crumbling slopes combined. On parts of the Oregon coast, emergency experts say the shaking could last 5 to 7 minutes, long enough to realize what's happening and still won't be over. Then comes the scariest part. In some places, a tsunami can hit in 15 to 30 minutes. Remember, the earthquake is a warning. If you're on the coast and you feel strong, long shaking, you do not need to wait for a text alert or a siren, or someone on the news to yell tsunami. During the tremors, the basic recommendation is to literally drop to the ground, cover, and hold on, staying away from windows and chandeliers that can fall on you. As tempting as it is, we shouldn't stop to make a reel out of the situation. Before anything happens, make one decision while your brain is calm. Pick the closest high ground and go for it. Not somewhere uphill, an actual spot. If you ever needed a reason to learn your neighborhood, this is it. Your instinct might say, get into the car and drive. But don't. Roads are probably jammed and bridges could be damaged. People who live on the coast already know to keep it practical, with shoes on the bed and a go bag prepared just in case. The danger doesn't end with the first impact because the tsunami waves, well, they come in waves. The initial hit is rarely the largest, and the ocean can continue to pulse in and out for hours. This creates a violent tug-of-war. The receding water acts like a massive vacuum, dragging anything caught in the backwash out to sea. Japan's 2011 disaster is the most recent vivid example of what a magnitude 9.1 can do. The seafloor shifted in a single massive heave, and minutes later, the ocean literally rearranged the coast. A huge wall of water crashed inland, reaching over 100 feet high in some spots, and turning the coastline into a conveyor belt of debris. It was like water turned cars into giant bowling balls and shipping containers into massive metal bricks, smashing ports and drowning low-lying airports and electrical substations. Finally, what do officials say about the timeline for the possible next disaster hitting Cascadia? Well, they can't give us precise dates, but they did announce some odds. For the biggest, scariest earthquake possible, the United States Geological Survey says there is about a 10% to 15% chance it'll happen in the next 50 years. Chances for a quake that isn't the mega version are 1 in 3 in the next 5 decades. Those odds are actually pretty high. But here is why it isn't all that grim. Scientists know this isn't random. Cascadia has a pattern, and patterns are what preparation runs on. We already know how to build for big shaking, and we're getting better at spotting where stress is building. It doesn't mean we can stop the earthquake, but it means we're getting way better at knowing what to expect. In the meantime, just keep a go bag by the door and maybe take a walk around your neighborhood every once in a while. Scientists just found out that the Earth's crust beneath the Marmara Sea is sending seismic signals that look exactly like the kind that show up before a major earthquake. An earthquake that can shake entire coastlines and send waves racing toward crowded cities. For years, scientists focused on visible ruptures on land because they could measure and map them easily. But now, they made a detailed map of a huge fault system under the seafloor. The Mediterranean already sits at a dangerous crossroads where massive tectonic plates meet. Those plates push, scrape, and stretch against each other, and that constant motion creates massive stress. The The crust there grows thinner over time, and thinner crust means it can't absorb stress easily. Stress builds, pressure mounts, and the signals coming from below show that parts of this fault system have started to move in unusual ways. The new map shows that future large earthquakes may begin at the boundaries where weaker and stronger sections of the crust meet, or along edges of highly resistive zones. They even pinpointed one of the most likely locations, beneath the Marmara Sea. What makes this discovery so intense is the scale. The faults in the seabed form long corridors where energy can accumulate for decades or centuries. Scientists warn that this setup is the kind that can produce a super earthquake, a massive seismic event capable of shaking large coastal cities and possibly generating tsunamis. A tsunami forms when the seafloor shifts vertically and displaces huge amounts of water, so it looks really plausible in this setting. The water it sets free radiates outward in powerful waves that can cross entire seas. The Mediterranean holds dozens of densely populated shorelines, so it could affect millions of lives. Speaking of that, let's zoom in on Istanbul, Turkey's largest and most populous city. The massive fault line sitting right under it doesn't act the way scientists thought it did. For years, experts looked at the main Marmara Fault, a branch of the North Anatolian Fault running beneath the Sea of Marmara, and worried it might rip in one single monstrous rupture. That kind of break could unleash a megaquake in the high 7s or beyond. But when scientists ran detailed computer simulations covering more than 10,000 years of earthquake cycles, they saw something different. The fault doesn't behave like one giant zipper waiting to unzip all at once. It behaves more like a row of connected tiles that break in sections. And the reason comes down to what's happening miles below the seafloor. It's called rheology. Simply put, how materials deform under stress, how rocks bend, stretch, or snap when you squeeze them hard enough. Under the central Sea of Marmara, giant piles of compacted mud, sand, and debris sit on top of warmer crust. In those upper layers, the sediment usually deforms slowly and steadily, especially at shallow depths where pressure and heat interact in specific ways. Deeper down, higher temperatures weaken the rocks. Warm rock flows more easily than cold rock. That heat acts like a built-in brake system that limits how far a rupture can tear through the crust. When researchers built a 3D earthquake cycle model, they fed in real heat flow measurements, rock friction data, and structural details, and replayed thousands of years of seismic activity. When they included both sediment thickness and temperature differences, the model finally matched history, including the powerful quakes of 1766 and 1912. And none of the simulated events exceeded magnitude 7.3. That level of shaking can collapse buildings, fracture infrastructure, and cause landslides. But it differs from the nightmare scenario of one continuous coast-to-coast rupture. Instead, different sections behave in different ways. The western segments produce more regular earthquakes, including magnitude 7.2 events roughly every 150 years. The eastern sections generate smaller double quakes, back-to-back events between magnitude 6.2 and 6.8 about every century, and a magnitude 7.0 roughly every 500 years. Parts of the fault don't snap at all, but creep. Scientists call it shallow creep, which just means the fault slowly slides without producing a major quake. It releases tension quietly, like letting air out of a balloon instead of popping it. GPS measurements and clusters of repeating small quakes over the past 20 years confirm that slow slip near the central basin. So what does this mean for Istanbul, a city of over 15 million people sitting practically on top of this system? A magnitude 7 or 7.3 quake close to the city could still rock neighborhoods, especially if two strong events strike in quick succession. Infrastructure, older buildings, and densely packed districts are at the highest risk. The fault hasn't produced a major rupture in this section since 1894, which means there's more than 130 years of accumulated strain. The simulations show major events could strike in the coming decades. Then there's Santorini, where more than 28,000 earthquakes happened in just a few months in early 2025. Most of the quakes stayed small, but some reached magnitude 5, strong enough to fracture walls, rattle nerves, and push authorities to close schools and evacuate parts of the island. And this wasn't just tectonic plates grinding like they usually do. This swarm moved. The epicenters shifted gradually northeast toward the Colombo submarine volcano about 5 miles offshore. That migration told scientists magma was on the move. Researchers calculated that roughly 80 billion gallons of it, enough to fill about 120,000 Olympic swimming pools, surged upward from depths around 11 miles beneath the surface. It climbed fast, then stalled about 2 to 2.5 miles below the seafloor. And all this was going on along the Hellenic Arc, one of Europe's most active subduction zones, where the African plate dives beneath the Eurasian region. Earthquakes often migrate across that span toward nearby islands. History backs that up. The 1956 Amorgos earthquakes unleashed massive shaking and a tsunami across the region. So, when 28,000 tremors light up the seismic network, you pay attention. This episode changed how scientists understand volcanic swarms. Now they know magma can intrude, fracture miles of crust, reshape underground reservoirs, and still never surface. It can load the system for the future without pulling the trigger today. And that matters because when magma moves like this, it changes stress fields underground and how future quakes might breed. The good news is that scientists now have really cool monitoring tools that feed real-time seismic feeds, underwater pressure sensors, and repeated gas measurements near volcanic vents into integrated hazard models. If magma starts accelerating upward again, researchers will see it and will take action. And there's another bold new idea in earthquake and tsunami warning: using undersea internet cables for this purpose. Nearly 1 million miles of those fiber optic lines on the seabed were designed to carry data, but scientists discovered that they can also detect tiny changes in light signals caused by seismic vibrations. In simple terms, when the ground shakes, the cable feels it. And this could be incredibly useful because forecasting earthquakes, even on land, is tricky. In the ocean, it has felt almost impossible as you can't scatter thousands of sensors across the seafloor easily. But those cables already sit there, stretching across deep trenches and continental shelves. If researchers use them as sensors, they can monitor tectonic movement in real time across huge areas. For a region like the Mediterranean, with hidden faults, active volcanoes, and crowded coasts, that system could offer precious seconds or minutes of warning. Seconds sound small, but early alerts let trains stop, gas lines shut down, and people move away from immediate danger. The fiber optic cable used for Seafloor Project, or FOCUS in the short version, didn't warn anyone about real disasters yet, but it had 2 false alarms. It reacted to a submarine landslide and weight bags that pushed the cables down. It proves the system works and could be life-saving in case of real danger, especially in vulnerable regions such as the Mediterranean. It shaped civilizations for thousands of years, and now science reveals it still shapes itself. They can't stop tectonic plates or cool magma chambers, but they can understand patterns, reduce vulnerability, and design cities smarter. We are on the Sea of Marmara, the exact spot where the massive continents of Europe and Asia meet. It's a vital, beautiful waterway packed with cargo ships on the surface, but dive underneath and you'll find a geographical nightmare lying on the seafloor. Deep underwater, 2 massive slabs of the Earth's crust are violently grinding past each other. This isn't just a minor crack in the dirt, it's a colossal geological fault. A massive complex system of continuous fractures that has been accumulating a devastating amount of energy for decades. We call it the Great North Anatolian Fault. All this energy has to be unleashed someday. And when it happens, it's going to hit one of the most densely populated areas on our planet. Scientists are now in active monitoring mode, especially when it comes to Turkey. This country is sitting on the Anatolian Plate, a small bite of the Earth's crust. Nowadays, it's being literally smashed by the Arabian Plate from the south and the Eurasian Plate from the north. Because it's being squeezed so hard, the only direction it can move is west toward the Aegean Sea, and it actually does this at a speed of about 1 inch per year. In geological terms, that's a high-speed, violent movement. Millions of tons of solid rock grinding against each other deep underground day and night without a single break? Not the best thing to experience. All this endless moving, cracking, and squeezing is what creates the North Anatolian Fault, a 930-mile-long fault line that acts almost exactly like the infamous San Andreas Fault. Yet the difference is striking. While the San Andreas mostly skirts the outer edges of Californian megacities or runs through less dense regions, the fault in Turkey is running right under major industrial hubs and heavily populated urban centers. In February 2023, the smaller sister of it, the East Anatolian Fault, showed us how dangerous this tectonic setup can be. It generated the most catastrophic earthquake recorded in Turkey in over 60 years, a brutal 7.8 monster hit and a 7.5 shockwave followed right behind it just hours later. The release of energy was so violent that the ground literally moved by almost 10 feet in some places. Entire cities were leveled and the physical map of the region permanently shifted. Now the worst part, it wasn't even the grand finale. There's no way to stop that energy packed inside the North Anatolian Faults. Look at the old data and you'll see it acts like clockwork, a bit like a line of falling dominoes. Scientists have been tracking every sequence of earthquakes in this region for nearly a century. The whole chain reaction started in 1939 with the catastrophic Erzincan earthquake. A massive magnitude 7.8 struck eastern Turkey. It didn't simply release the energy, but also transferred this tectonic stress into the next section of the fault. Dominoes started falling. Other fault ruptured happened in 1942, 1943, and 1944. It went west and struck again in 1957 and 1967. Year by year, the epicenters of these massive earthquakes moved in a straight line toward the Sea of Marmara. The last major impact was the Izmit earthquake in 1999. A magnitude 7.6 tremor struck east of Istanbul and lasted for 37 terrifying seconds. Suddenly, the chain reaction took a break, but the tectonic stress was still there, simply transferred to the next section of the fault, under the Sea of Marmara, where the last major earthquake took place in 1766. Nobody had seismographs back then, but historical records and old journals describe it as a scene of unimaginable horror. Now, modern science tells us exactly why it was so devastating. Scientists are calling it a seismic gap, basically a dangerously quiet zone that hasn't ruptured yet. Back then, 260 years ago, a massive quake destroyed a huge part of Istanbul and generated a tsunami that crashed into the city's ports. After this tragedy, it didn't happen again on this scale, but we have to remember that the Anatolian Plate has never stopped moving west, an inch a year. Let's do some quick math. That land should have moved by over 19 feet by now, but because those rocks are locked together, they haven't moved an inch. We are looking at a massive backlog of tectonic tension. It simply has to snap finally, and it won't make a regular shake. It will likely rapidly release 2.5 centuries of accumulated tectonic energy, right at the doorstep of Europe and Asia. The target is the city of Istanbul once again. We should call it a supercity because this global mega hub is home to an astonishing 15 million people. It accounts for nearly 30% of Turkey's entire economic output. What about the infrastructure? We're talking about 1 million buildings, and an estimated 90,000 of those are at high risk of total collapse in the event of a magnitude 7.5 earthquake. Nowadays, the city has very strict laws for modern buildings. But plenty of urban areas had been built before those regulations were enforced. To make matters worse, many coastal neighborhoods are built on soft, waterlogged soil that acts like a liquid during extreme shaking, multiplying the danger for the residents. Buildings could just sink into quicksand. And there's more. The seafloor of the Marmara Sea isn't flat. There are 3 massive deep underwater holes separated by vast ridges. Why is it important? A stronger earthquake in this area will probably trigger a massive submarine landslide. Plenty of mud and rock collapsing down those underwater canyons would instantly displace massive amounts of water. This would trigger a tsunami, not as tall as mega tsunamis in the open Pacific Ocean, but still highly dangerous. It's estimated that with a 10-foot wall of water, it will be extremely dangerous for this densely populated area. Scientists also claim that it could hit the coastline within 10 minutes. There would be almost no time for a mass evacuation. Here comes modern technology. Engineers are fully aware that this geographical clock is ticking and are fighting back. Essentially, infrastructure is being heavily retrofitted. Also, the mighty bridges crossing the Bosphorus Strait have been reinforced with seismic dampers to absorb extreme shocks. One of the world's largest seismically isolated buildings is located at Sabiha Gökçen International Airport in Istanbul. It's sitting on massive bearings made out of rubber and steel. The absolute art of engineering is the Marmara Tunnel, a massive railway tube that runs directly under the Bosphorus Strait, physically connecting the European and Asian continents underwater. It was built right next to an active fault line, so it had to be designed with flexible earthquake-proof joints. If a megaquake hits and the continents shift, the tunnel will bend and flex like a giant snake rather than snapping in half. Another concern of scientists is the economic aftershock of this rupture. It may affect the entire globe, as the Bosphorus Strait is one of the world's most critical maritime choke points. Every single year, nearly 50,000 ships pass through this narrow waterway, carrying everything that is crucial for the global market: barrels of oil, agricultural goods, and so on. The price of energy and food would go crazy if this shipping line collapses. To buy some precious time, scientists have installed an advanced early warning network on the seafloor of the Marmara Sea. Fiber optic cables and seismometers are constantly listening to the fault. But because the epicenter is located so incredibly close to the city, even this multi-million-dollar system won't give residents enough time to escape. At best, it will provide a maximum of 5 to 7 seconds of warning before the destructive waves hit the city. 5 seconds to shut down gas lines, halt the trains, and brace for the impact. Of course, all this effort won't protect the whole city. Only a fraction will survive. The undeniable conclusion is that the migration of earthquakes isn't just a theory, but a well-documented geographical reality. Scientists estimate that there is a 65% probability of a magnitude 7 or greater earthquake striking the Sea of Marmara region before the year 2030. Now we can see that the rupture in this area isn't just a possibility. It is coming, and it is migrating directly toward the collision point of 2 continents.
A network of deep faults runs right beneath Seattle, and it can shift at any moment, affecting millions of people. The consequences could be as catastrophic as in the past, when a devastating quake lifted the seafloor, collapsed shorelines, and triggered a massive tsunami. It happened in the winter of the year 923. A powerful earthquake hit what is now the Seattle area. It reached around magnitude 7.5, and the impact was terrifying. The ground didn't just shake violently, it shifted. Shorelines collapsed, parts of the seafloor lifted upward, and a tsunami swept through Puget Sound, flooding coastal areas. This event came from the Seattle Fault Zone. This is a complex system of faults that runs directly beneath modern-day Seattle, and it's still active today. This makes it one of the most dangerous geologic threats in the Pacific Northwest. Now, what threat does it present? Well, if a similar earthquake happened now, it would hit a densely populated region, putting millions of people at risk. It would also cause billions of dollars in damage to buildings, roads, and infrastructure. Scientists have started studying this fault more closely to understand how often it produces major earthquakes. They looked at the past 11,000 years to analyze time gaps between large seismic events. Well, the results are kinda mixed. On the one hand, devastating earthquakes, like the one that hit in 923, seem to be extremely rare. In fact, it's the only known quake of that size, magnitude 7.5 or higher, linked to this fault zone. So we can hope that the worst-case scenario, where massive earthquakes like this happen often, is unlikely. But researchers have also made a rather worrying discovery. Smaller earthquakes happen more frequently than expected. And while these quakes may not reach magnitude 7.5, they can still damage buildings, crack roads, disrupt utilities, and trigger landslides. In a modern city like Seattle, even a moderate earthquake can cause really serious problems. In other words, the region still faces regular seismic risk. The fault is active, the pressure builds over time, and the ground can move again. The real danger is the ongoing threat of smaller but still destructive earthquakes, and they may strike with little warning. Now let's take a closer look at the Seattle Fault Zone. It's this huge fault system sitting right under Seattle, a whole network that stretches about 46 miles from the mountains east of the city, all the way to the water on the west side. And yes, it runs directly under Seattle. It's a thrust fault, which means one chunk of ground is slowly pushing up over another. That pressure builds up for a long time, and then suddenly releases. That's when you get a big earthquake. Scientists didn't really start digging into this until the 1990s, when they noticed strange gravity readings. Plus, they found signs that a tsunami had hit the area about 1,000 years ago. All of that pointed to one thing: something catastrophic happened here before, most likely that huge earthquake back in 923. But there was a problem. The data they had managed to gather only went back about 5,000 years. This certainly isn't enough to see a clear pattern. So researchers decided to dig deeper and turn to something called marine terraces. These are old coastlines that got pushed upward by earthquakes and now form something like steps along the shore. Now, an important detail. The 923 earthquake lifted the land by about 26 feet. So scientists started looking for other terraces with the same kind of shift. They mapped out more than 150 of these terraces around Puget Sound, measuring their height and adjusting for natural slopes. It turned out that only one event in an 11,000-year window caused a big uplift like that: the 923 earthquake. As for smaller quakes, those could be hidden under layers of sediment. It means that huge city-shaking earthquakes are very rare, possibly with 5,000 years or even more between them. But it doesn't mean the danger is gone. Smaller ones are what we should worry about. They hit way more often, and they can do serious damage. That's why researchers focused on smaller side faults. Those are called blind faults because you can't see them at the surface, but they can still trigger strong earthquakes, and they already have. One of these smaller faults caused a magnitude 6.7 quake in the past. That's strong enough to damage buildings, crack roads, and mess up infrastructure. So the team pulled together a bunch of tools, like magnetic scans, fieldwork, LiDAR maps. They even dug trenches across fault lines and used dating methods to figure out when past quakes occurred. In the end, they found 3 more earthquakes. One happened around 11,000 years ago. One more hit in the early 1800s. That's a pretty big gap. But it proves these smaller faults have been active for a long time. But the most worrying thing is that these quakes didn't line up with movement on the main fault. That means the smaller faults can rupture on their own. When the team added all this new data together, they saw a pattern. Smaller quakes hit about every 350 years over the last 2,500 years. That's more frequent than scientists used to think. And this activity seems to have picked up over the last 2,000 years. Now, researchers are trying to figure out how big these quakes can actually get, how often they hit, and what would happen if one struck today. But it's not so simple. They have to piece the whole picture together from rocks, layers of soil, and tiny clues they find underground. So, where does it leave Seattle? Well, there's a national system called the Seismic Hazard Model. It's what engineers and planners use to decide how strong buildings need to be, how to design infrastructure, that kind of thing. Right now, this system includes the big 923-style quake, but it doesn't really account for the smaller side faults. First of all, these faults are shorter than what the model usually considers. Second, we're still unsure about how powerful their quakes can get. That's why the model should probably be updated, and authorities need to start planning for those more frequent quakes. It could directly affect building codes and safety plans. Now, despite this worrying news, there are other even more dangerous faults on Earth. Like the San Andreas Fault. It cuts through California for about 800 miles. It's where two massive plates slide past each other sideways. That constant grinding builds pressure and then releases it fast. That's how you get quakes like the 1906 San Francisco disaster. Today, millions of people live right on top of it, so scientists track every, even the tiniest tremor with sensors, watching for signs of a bigger break. Then, there's the North Anatolian Fault that runs about 930 miles across Turkey. It tends to break in a chain reaction, one quake triggering the next along the line. In 1999, one of those breaks hit Izmit and took the lives of over 17,000 people. Now the stress is building closer to Istanbul, and that's a city with over 15 million people. The Sumatra subduction zone in Indonesia is where one plate dives under another, locking up tons of energy. In 2004, it unleashed a magnitude 9.1 quake and a tsunami that more than 230,000 people didn't survive. It's still active today, and scientists constantly monitor the seafloor and ocean pressure to catch tsunami signals as early as possible. The Alpi Belt stretches over 1,500 miles from southern Europe to Asia. It once helped build mountain ranges like the Alps. Here, plates crash into each other and push land upward. Quakes don't occur here often, but when they do, they can be powerful and hit heavily populated regions. Japan also sits right where several plates collide. It's one of the most earthquake-prone places on Earth. In 2011, a massive offshore quake triggered a tsunami and the Fukushima disaster. Since then, Japan has built one of the most advanced monitoring systems in the world. Thousands of sensors track ground movement in real time to send out warnings within seconds.